Hello everybody, and welcome. Uh, welcome to the session, Angry Punters. And yes, it's the 100-year anniversary of the poppy, and yeah, we wanted to take a minute to remember, reflect for those who have passed on and who have served. My name is Kiwat Cannell. I am the project coordinator for Music Victoria, and yeah, welcome to today's session. Joining me today is a very special person. She's joined us before. Our very helpful clinician, Bree Chapman Stewart. And for those who don't know Bree, Bree was originally born in Melbourne but raised in New Zealand. She was lucky enough to attend the Music and Audio Institute of New Zealand. She has spent most of her youth drumming in punk and pop rock bands within Auckland's live music scene. Bree returned to Melbourne in her early 20s, where she thoroughly enjoyed the diverse music community that the city had to offer. She began to shift her professional focus to emotional well-being after experiencing her own lived experience of mental health challenges. Bree has worked within digital crisis support, youth services, trauma, informed support, as well as consultancy positions across the health sector. Bree joins Music Victoria to help give back to the music community that raised her, with a focus on the collective challenges our industry has endured through this pandemic. While working at Music Victoria, Bree is finalising her postgraduate diploma in counselling and psychotherapy at the Australian College of Applied Psychology. So yeah, please welcome the one and only Bree Chapman Stewart. Big round of applause. Woo.
Thanks, Kiwa. I'm not gonna get used to that, man. That's oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, I don't really have to introduce myself now. I appreciate that.
That's all right. And yeah, just welcome to everyone as well. And also, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, of which lands we stand on. Today we're talking about angry punters and how to basically handle angry punters, dealing with angry punters, and talking about. We'll be talking about occupational violence, behavioural escalation, responding to angry punters, supporting yourself and staff, and everything during the COVID pandemic, and how to handle everything that's going on right now. But I will stop talking and hand it over to Bree to give you an introduction of everything. So take it away, Bree.
I just want to take you everywhere, Kiwa. You can just follow me around, like when I go to coffee dates and like hanging out with mates. It's amazing. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's been really great. I've only been here a short 4 weeks with Music Victoria, and it's been really quite incredible getting to know you all and just kind of being blown away, I suppose, by the resilience of this community in particular, and just everything that particularly the Victorian music community has endured over the last 18 months. It's really quite profound to see the resilience this community holds. So as Kiwat mentioned, mental health clinician consultant, this is funded by the Victorian state government, the service. Before I kick off, just to let you know that as part of the service, if you are a small business owner, if you're a musician, an individual, if you in any way, shape or form associate as being a member of Music Victoria or a member of even the Victorian music community, I'm here for wellbeing check-ins. If you'd like a wellbeing check-in, just email Bree at musicvictoria.com.au. There's also info on the website. And as part of that service, what we're offering too is free financial counselling and small business advisory services. So just something to keep back in mind. That's not what we're talking about today, but for those of you that are still learning about this offering that's in place till June next year at least. Like Kiwat said, we'll be looking at occupational violence. The small amount of housekeeping is it's really challenging sometimes to ensure that Zoom spaces reflect face-to-face peer spaces, but we want to ensure that this is quite a safe space, and we will be discussing occupational violence and aggression, certainly looking at the mandates and the new conditions everyone's under with the vaccine certificates, but also just broader, if there's any skills, tips or tricks that you can take away, it's just about kind of broadening your perspective. You're the expert in the work you do. You're the expert in terms of your punters. I'm not going to come in and pretend, I know what it's like on a day-to-day basis, but there might be some little nuggets of wisdom in terms of the psychological component of at least occupational violence and anger that may help to support your staff. And we'll look a little bit to it, sort of staff well-being and nurturing your staff if they've had to have a really adverse experience with a customer, essentially. A little bit of background on me. Prior to mental health, I worked at 000 as a police call taker. So I was really lucky to see a broad range of events come through in that role, and also get an understanding as to how police prioritize different events in our state as well. And through until my mid-20s, I also worked at a pub. So I've been on the receiving end of some pretty pissed off people too. So I'm hoping as we go along, there might be some gems in here for you to take away. If anyone wants the PDF of this PowerPoint afterwards, please don't hesitate to email me too, and I can send that through if you want to print it out for your staff. And as Kiwat mentioned, we'll do a Q&A at the end. So just to kick off, because I'm aware I'm about to throw heaps of information at you in a short space of time, WorkSafe has a pretty clear definition of occupational violence and aggression. So when we're talking about people that are coming to your venue and they're heightened because of these very new conditions, and they're coming to the venue with an awareness that they want to get in, but they don't have a certificate, that they kind of fall under this category of occupational violence and aggression. So this is when a person is abused, threatened, or assaulted in a situation related to their work. The threatening part is key, because that can be verbal. It can be really hard to pick up. If you've got a really angry punter, it might be obvious, but this includes peer-to-peer violence and aggression. So staff members that may be threatening other staff members as well. So there's a lot of information on WorkSafe's website there that might be useful, especially if you're in a leadership position. It can be really helpful to actually understand the definitions of these things and the resources that are available to your business as well. So we'll have a look at some of the key things you can look for in terms of an escalated individual. Many of you probably already know a lot of this information, but it's important that we're covering a few bases, and I'm not assuming that everyone's at the same level of knowledge in terms of, you know, the psychological patterns of escalation that you might see in an angry customer. I just want to acknowledge too, really quickly, that you know, one of the big myths I think we come across is that if someone's angry or a bit, you know, has out of control or threatening physical violence, that they automatically have a mental health diagnosis. All the data actually points to the opposite. So it's more common for someone who has a mental health diagnosis to be the target of aggressive and violent behavior. There's no real evidence that says if there's someone that's threatening your physical safety that they have a mental illness. So just acknowledging too that yes, they can intersect, but in being a bit more trauma informed and person-centered about mental health, acknowledging that people can just be aggressive because, you know, they've been triggered by an event or there's some internalized anger. So occupational violence and aggression obviously will impact your sense of safety and well-being. You know, if you've got someone that's threatening you or threatening your life or threatening to harm you at the door, inside your venue, or at work, it can cause psychological injury. It can be very difficult for some people to regain confidence and feel safe in their workplace again, particularly if they feel the situation wasn't taken seriously. So we'll have a little look after we've kind of unpacked the nitty-gritty of how a person gets to that stage. We'll also have a look at how you can support your staff directly after an event as well. Can everyone see the big keyword? Can I get a thumbs up? You can see it. Awesome. So there's a few different theories and models. I won't get too deep into them. I'm a psychotherapist, not a psychologist. So I'm not going to pretend I'm some Freudian wizard and overwhelm you with that. But many of you will have heard of a few of the things I'm going to discuss. One of them is the polyvagal theory, fight, flight, or freeze. So that's, you know, I think we forget in our futuristic society with digital screens and electric cars that we're all still mammals. And we still have really primal responses to threat. So I'll talk a little bit about how we respond to threat. And we'll also look at the 7 stages of behavior escalation. Can just be really good for those of you that still, like, I suppose, are getting used to not internalizing other people's anger And sometimes just knowing this stuff helps to depersonalize it. So when we have people screaming at us or yelling at us or telling us we're the problem, it can be really easy to believe all that. So sometimes it just helps to know that we've all felt anger, we've all experienced it. It's a very primal reaction. And the way that we process it actually collectively tends to be quite common. So the 7 stages of behavior escalation is a pretty common model that you'll see, and psychologists lean on it a lot. Basically, when adrenaline kicks in, we tend to have 20 minutes. So, and you might have seen this in your work, you get someone who's drunk, you've kicked them out of the venue and they'll be carrying on, and there's sort of this peak they hit and then they de-escalate, or it's almost like they run out of steam. So as humans, once adrenaline's kicked in, the adrenaline almost always outbids your logical thinking. It's very, very hard because it's wired into us, right? This is how we've survived and evolved. So when we look at the 7 stages of behavior escalation, what I find really interesting is if you look at this model and the setting pre-COVID, so say you've got someone at a venue, they've had a bit too much to drink, maybe earlier in the day, something pissed them off, who knows, but at the pub, someone says something, and it could be as simple as, you know, you look like a dick in that shirt. I don't know, something's made them feel shame or made them feel an internal trigger, and it's activated an event within them, right? So usually you'll see, all right, I've been triggered by something. I don't know necessarily how to regulate that right now. I'm agitated. They'll move into, you know, the state of kind of acceleration, I suppose. The conflict's not resolved within them, so they're going to focus on that event. Or that guy just said my shirt was crap, I'm really pissed off now, you know. And remembering that anger too is an internal response, right? So often actually when we're angry and we're projecting it, it's not necessarily the event that's happened in front of us. The event might be pulling something up. Like I know for me, you know, if my boss has a go at me in the morning, it's quite likely that I'll carry that anger through the day and end up projecting on my partner at the other end of the day, or perhaps snapping at the barista making my coffee. So we see this in society as well, and I'm sure that we've all done it ourselves. But pre-COVID, you might see someone kind of get triggered, get agitated, escalate. If they don't de-escalate, they'll peak out, and that's when they're making a fuss at your venue. They're making other customers feel uncomfortable, your staff feel uncomfortable. What's interesting, I think, is that just anecdotally, what we've been seeing with the vaccine mandate is at this sort of trigger activating event, this has happened weeks ago, because for people who don't want to get vaccinated, it's a personal decision, it's a health decision. These are very new conditions, right? So understandably, there's a whole spectrum of people who are feeling disempowered, and their anger is actually directed at these new conditions. It's directed at perhaps the government, perhaps COVID in itself, perhaps, you know, there's a whole range of reasons people could be triggered by the mandated vaccine. So we actually might find that when people are arriving at our businesses and our venues, we're not given that chance that we usually have to, oh, I think we need to keep an eye on that customer. He seems to be getting a wee bit worse, or seems to be getting a bit more irritable. They're rocking up to the venue knowing, you know, that they probably won't be able to get in, and potentially are rocking up ready for a fight. So it's quite a unique position for your staff to be in that sense. And certainly if there are venues that have security, that's brilliant. There's probably a little bit more autonomy for staff, or more of a sense of safety to be able to lean on that security. But for venues that don't, it can be really tricky to navigate. So again, if anyone wants this, it's just a bit of a roadmap as to how we escalate as individuals, but it's in this PDF, so I'm happy to shoot it through to you. And thank you for staying with me, because that is a lot of wanky psychological information in a short period of time.
I think it's great. I think it's great.
Thanks, mate. So the other thing, and again, especially for those of us who've worked in pubs and clubs and running gigs for a while, will be pretty familiar with this. Those working in security, most definitely. But there's things that we do that are non-verbal warning signs. So things that we do with our body when we're angry. And the reason I wanted to cover them off is, of course, you've seen them in your customers when they're in this space. But sometimes what we do, and we'll jump to it in a minute, is we'll actually mirror people, you know, we'll mirror people in that space. So when we talk about fight, flight, or freeze response, that sort of polyvagal theory, some people might lean towards one more than another. So I know for me, if I feel threatened, I tend to fight back, right? So what I'll do is if someone comes up to me and stares me down, I actually find myself mirroring that behavior without realizing, and it works on the other end of the spectrum. It's how we connect with one another. So when you're talking to someone, you're having a nurturing, vulnerable conversation with each other, you might lean in, and you find you're both leaning into each other or mirroring each other's movements. It's really, really common. But it's good to just watch out for them because they're not conscious things we do. And sometimes when we're dealing with someone, we might actually meet them at their conflict when there's some small things we can do with our body language that sort of opens us up a little bit and may help to de-escalate the other person. But we'll jump there in a minute. But for those of you that haven't come across any sort of customer conflict before or severe conflict with another person, clinching, staring through you, face flushing, heavy breathing, and flaring nostrils, apparently, according to the data, is the most common physical sign or non-verbal warning sign that someone's escalating. Alrighty, so I'll be talking about, I'll use the term person-centered a wee bit over the next sort of 10 minutes or so. I'll dive into what that means, but basically when we're responding to people, there's just some really simple things we can do with our language, and it's that really person-centered approach to communication. I have never seen anyone calm down in a whole range of situations, including on the phone at 000. I've never seen or heard of anyone calming down from being told to calm down. It almost always has the complete opposite response, and I remember when we started working at 000, that was a really common go-to on the phone when someone's, freaking out, they've been in a car accident, there's a burglar in their house, whatever it may be, I'll just calm down. People immediately feel almost a sense of shame for having that experience. It's a very normal human experience of aggression. Anger is usually a secondary symptom to something else. So people are feeling pent up and then we're just telling them to calm down. So what we want to do is start using that kind of person-centered communication. So I can hear that you're angry. Like I acknowledge that you are angry right now. And that's sort of the lens we want to come out of, as opposed to kind of just calm down. If there's ever a time that's worked, I'll let you know, but to date, I haven't seen that ever pan out too well. If vaccine mandate related, it's important to remind them that this is a public health order if you can. It's dependent on the context of the conversation, but I am seeing and hearing anecdotally from people that a lot of the anger is just being projected at the venue. Like, I want a beer, I want to sit down, I want to watch the sport, or I want to watch a gig. Just reminding them again that this isn't actually a personal choice or even necessarily a business choice. This is a public health order. So you're required to do this by law. Seeking support from other staff is also really important. I know that's really challenging for some venues more than others, but people shouldn't, none of us should feel isolated in managing conflict to this degree. This is a sort of socio-political issue, so it's very unique, and leaving one staff member on the door, it might be worth rethinking. I don't know, every business is going to have a different structure, but if you leave a staff member isolated with an angry person at the door, that's where it can get really tricky. But we'll go into that further soon as well. If the punter's threatening violence, and as someone that used to work at a pub and often work just with one other person in a very large venue, I know it can be hard to take yourself away from a physically dangerous situation because, of course, we feel a sense of duty to everyone else in the venue and we feel a sense of duty to our customers. But it's important, if they're threatening to harm you, that you do not engage further in conversation with this person. That at some point we need to put in a boundary and retreat and make sure we're safe. If you've got security, again, this is a beautiful space to bring them in because they're trained, to manage these situations. If you don't, phoning 000, saying you're in Victoria, you need police, and having your business address front of mind. something I found really interesting at my time at 000 was people, there was a real sense of hesitancy to ring 000, almost a sense of they've got better things to do than come and get this person out of my venue. But remembering that when I worked there, we'd get calls about people's, my neighbor's bins in my driveway, all the way down to there's an accident on the freeway. So just acknowledging too that don't feel any shame that you've had to call police, because they've got a whole team of people there that will triage the event, and that's their job to do. The main thing is that you're safe and you're not at physical risk of harm. So we talked a little bit earlier about that mirroring thing. So when we were talking about our kind of non-verbal cues, so it's pretty incredible. Studies have indicated time and time again every year that 90% of human communication is non-verbal. So while you're interpreting the body language of other people are constantly interpreting yours as well. So it's really tricky, especially when we're being confronted, to shift that unconscious, all those unconscious little micro things we do with our body into a conscious state of being. So if you look at this woman on the left, and you can imagine you've got some dickhead at your door telling you you're an asshole for not granting access. That's a pretty reasonable response, is to kind of match that body language and match his facial or her facial expressions, right? But it's actually incredible the difference it can make when you relax your arms, open your stance up a bit, and keep that gaze going with them. Don't kind of look at the wall or try and shut them down. I don't know about this bloke's smile. Sometimes the smile's coming across a bit smirky. Sometimes a smile can be interpreted as a threat as well. But just even if the face is too hard to kind of manage consciously, because it does take quite a bit of practice to start to become self-aware of our body language, but just opening up your stance a bit and making sure you're not crossing your arms too much or trying to power stance them back, because these are the things that we just don't know which way they can go. There's certainly a whole realm of people that may then withdraw because they see that you're matching them, but there's also a great deal of people that will actually escalate further. So trying to get a little bit indifferent in our stance and not trigger people further. If anyone does want this PDF too, there's links to all the resources. If you're a bit of a data nerd or you want to see the evidence base, there's links at the bottom of all these slides as well, so you can check out the theory behind everything and the studies that have been done. Alrighty, so when that sort of person-centered approach I was talking about earlier, just the therapist and me coming out now a wee bit. So there was a bloke called Carl Rogers in the 1940s, and he developed a model called person-centered therapy. And in our day-to-day lives, we can take on a person-centered approach when we're communicating with others, and especially when we're setting boundaries, which in a situation like this, dealing with an angry punter, especially around a socio-political issue such as a mandatory vaccine, can be really helpful. So the person-centered communicator learns to recognize and trust human potential, providing others with empathy and unconditional positive regard to help facilitate change. So we can still use this in setting boundaries. And a lot of it is that shifting from, I'm sure some of you have heard this before, but shifting from the you statements, you're the problem, to the I statements. So I hear you and I understand this must be incredibly difficult. It makes sense that you feel angry. This is all very new. I'm keen to listen, but I won't be able to help you until we both take a breath, because we need to speak respectfully. If they're at that real peak point where you're starting to worry, okay, my customers are feeling uncomfortable that are in the venue, my staff are looking uncomfortable, I'm unable to continue this conversation with you. So it's not necessarily you're being unreasonable, you need to calm down, you need to leave. It's that I can't keep discussing this with you right now. We can't continue this conversation. And even saying, I've got to look out for the customers that are here. I need to make sure my staff are safe. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. So it's a minor thing and it sounds really drab, but it is amazing how it's that little bit of, it's your own boundary that you're honoring, right? It's not necessarily about them. Because like I've said, almost in every instance with angry individuals or people, and we've experienced it ourselves in our lives, the anger that we've internalized usually is projected at the wrong place. So it's not actually about us, despite how incredibly personal it feels in the moment. And we are human, you know, so we're going to feel that. So again, as mentioned earlier, I'm here until June if anyone wants a session, and if anyone feels like they want to talk a little bit more about person-centered communication or how to implement boundaries with really aggressive people, feel free to book in with me too, and we can have a one-to-one. So when a person's overwhelmed, and this is kind of focusing now a little bit more on ourselves, so acknowledging that it's fine to kind of talk about all of this and go through slides and get a little bit more theoretical about what causes anger and how to manage it. But it's very different in the moment. It's very, very different in the moment. And this is a situation where we all have different perspectives and different values. You know, some of us may really value the vaccine. You know, some of us believe it's the way to go. It's the right thing to do. Others are a bit on the fence, and others think it's you know, an absolute hit to our human rights and our civil rights. So it's a very complex new condition. But just pivoting back, I suppose, to ourselves and to our staff, when a person is overwhelmed, they will become hyper aroused, or they can become hyper aroused. So this means that the nervous system's overactivated when we're put in a position of danger by a customer, whether it's a perceived threat or a real threat. Yourselves, just like the customer, will likely experience a desire to fight, to run, or to immobilize. So back to that fight, flight, freeze response. If you have a staff member that you can see is shutting down, you know, and occasionally you might see this in your personal lives as well, someone that's just freezing in the moment, doesn't know which action to take, doesn't know what to do next. I just want to acknowledge that many adult Australians have experienced past trauma. They've experienced adverse childhood experiences. Perhaps they had a parent that was neglectful, abusive, manipulative, narcissistic. There's the data every year is more and more full on, actually, in that regard, that the amount of resilient individuals in this country who've dealt with developmental trauma, it's quite high. So as peers or as staff or as leaders, we need to be mindful that for some people experiencing an aggressive customer, an aggressive event like that can really re-traumatize us. So if you see a staff member who's immobilizing completely, that could actually be a shutdown response. So they just may not be able to kind of, it's one of the oldest protective mechanisms that we have, where we just dissociate. So, you know, Stephen Porges, who sort of developed polyvagal theory, says under threat, the heart begins to beat faster, the sympathetic nervous system's activated, the body produces cortisol, and that activates the fight or flight response. But immobilization, so the most ancient mechanism of defense, when faced with a potential life-threatening situation, the autonomic nervous system shuts down and self-preservation through the conservation of energy begins to occur. If you do see a staff member who is shut down, it could be good to kind of nurture that a little bit and just check in and just check that they're traveling okay. And we'll just jump to that now, actually. So again, you can contact me if you want some tips on how to support staff members. And, you know, we can't expect every single person in a leadership position to be a psychotherapist. That's just not necessarily the worst thing in the world if we were, but it's just unachievable as well. But we can sort of learn some gentle changes and shifts in language and just some basic things that we can do to support staff and ourselves. So on this slide, you'll see I've put supporting yourself at the top. And the reason being is, I know it's quite hard as a leader because you want to serve your staff first. You want to serve your customers first, but really we can't properly do that until we've regulated ourselves. So if you yourself are feeling like you're burnt out or you've just dealt with a really intense event with a customer, ensuring too that you're doing the basics to make sure that you're kind of not running off an empty tank when you're going to support everyone else, because there's, a real thing called compassion fatigue and vicarious fatigue as well, where you're constantly supporting everyone else, you're neglecting yourself, and then you just run yourself into the ground and you're not available to your staff anyway at that point. So some basic things, just retreating to a safe, quiet space, especially after a triggering event. I know for many businesses, there'll be different incident policies. So you might need to fill in an incident report or fill in a risk report for OH&S reasons. But when you can, retreating to a safe, quiet space. And I feel like I can probably hear the eye rolls from kilometers away, because if you're working in a busy pub, the chance of getting a minute to retreat to a safe, quiet space and do a meditation is pretty slim. But even if you can go out to the back and just acknowledge what you've just been through, pop a hand on your heart or your stomach or wherever you're feeling all of that energy, it tends to be in these two areas if it's quite a triggering event. And just breathing in for 4 to 6 seconds and out for 4 to 6 seconds. Again, anyone that's interested, I've got at least 3 resources on the top of my head that are just short meditations, but we don't really have to complicate it. It's just sitting there, a few deep breaths, digging our heels into the ground and making sure that we're grounding our bodies back after we've been set off from an activating event, because it really does affect our physiology, and I think we forget that the feedback loop, mental health and our bodies are just so interconnected. There's a big nerve running from our brains down to our gut, so making sure that you're taking that time to at least restore your energy. Once you've done that, because I'd recommend doing this before checking in on your staff if you can, is just reaching out. How are you feeling? I'm here to listen when you're ready. You don't need to be an expert. Often have clients come in and go, I don't know what to say to my staff member. I don't understand this particular team member. You don't really need to. I think the person-centered approach is just the check-in and the open-ended check-in, like, how are you feeling? How are you going? That was really full on, and I'm here to listen when you're ready. And knowing too that just being able to listen, that's quite a profound leadership skill. Not needing to know the solution in the moment, that's not necessary. Most people, if they feel held, will feel supported. So focusing on them, non-judgmental ears. We've all come from different backgrounds. Some people have this sort of toughen it up mentality, like, we just got to get back on the horse, get over it. That's fine, but we don't all operate that way. We all have different ways of experiencing our feelings and different ways of coping. So just, I hear you're feeling X, Y, and Z. So if they say, oh, that made me feel shit or anxious or whatever, yeah, I can hear that. I hear you're feeling stressed. Is that right? Have I got that right? And what can I do? What can we do to support you for the rest of the evening or the rest of the day? And acknowledging too, they may not want to talk straight away, and that's okay as well. But even that skill of just, I'm here when you're ready for a chat and if you need a chat. The great thing about this service too is if they don't want to talk to you or they don't feel comfortable talking to anyone in the organization, feel free to give your team my email. They can book in with me if they have felt relatively traumatized by an event with an angry punter. So more than welcome to do that. And if they don't want to email me, again, via the Music Victoria website, there's a booking system so they can just book in confidentially. And just to drive home too, to everyone that's here, that every single session with me is completely confidential. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't go to government or anything like that. It doesn't go to Simone. It just stays between me and the person I'm talking to. The only limit to that confidentiality is if they're at risk of hurting themselves or someone else. So on top of our services, so the Partners and Wellbeing program is actually the program that's provided me. They also have a helpline. It's open 9 to 5 weekdays. And I think it's open the weekends as well, but I haven't got the times in there, but I'm pretty sure they are open on the weekends. So that's just a confidential helpline. They can support your staff or yourself with anything you're up against. They are also able to refer you into financial counselling and small business advisory services if you don't want to go through me. And then of course there's Support Act, so they're 24/7, the Music Wellbeing Helpline. Lifeline's there too, and I really recommend the team at Sane Australia. They're open a bit later as well. They're open till 10 p.m. just during weekdays. but they have quite in-depth understanding of trauma and an in-depth understanding of sort of stress and anxiety, and certainly have been working this whole time through COVID. So have a pretty broad range of expertise there around everything that's been going on the last 18 months or so for our community. And I think we're over to Q&A, Kiwa. Whew. Thanks, guys. That was a lot of information out of my mouth.
That was great. Thank you so much, Bree. Can we get a big round of applause for Bree and all of the content that she's been sharing? Thank you very much. Big round of applause. Haven't done that in forever. Thank you so much. Just fade out my renter crowd. It's great. Yeah, I think we do have a couple of questions. And if anyone else has some further questions, please just drop them in the chat box and I'll direct them to Bree. We've got 2 questions here from Diana. Are there any words you can use other than angry? Sorry, there goes my phone. Oh my god. There we go. It's my sister. It's all right. Are there any words you can use other than angry? Some folks get even angry if you can say, "I can see you're angry."
Yeah, that's such a good question, Diana. And yeah, definitely. So you're right. Sometimes if you reflect back what a person's feeling, that can actually be quite stark. And often I think because it's true, you know, and like I said, anger is a secondary symptom, usually to something else. So yeah, like I can hear that you're feeling frustrated, or I can hear that this is really uncomfortable for you, you know. Yeah, I think I think too, this is just when we talked just now about the person-centered approach. Another thing we can do, again, it's going to depend on your resource. It's not like we have time to kind of sit there with someone all day and psychoanalyze what they're frustrated about. But if you've got capacity to go, like, what is it about this that's frustrating you? And it's okay to own and acknowledge that it's hard for you as well. I think sometimes that's really powerful. Like, yeah, it's hard to navigate all of this, isn't it? You know, and just bringing it to the broader issue, which is a mandate, you know, and a new set of conditions. And I think yeah, it's such a great question. I think too, when I first got into crisis support and mental health, I had a supervisor say, always come back to feeling, just come back to the feeling. You don't necessarily need to get stuck into the nitty gritty as to what they're pissed off about, but what they're actually experiencing in the moment. Don't know if that answered your question, but I hope it helped a little bit. It was a good question.
Yeah. Another question from Diana as well. Would it be useful to do some role playing with other staff members, band members in advance of the show?
God, yeah, that's super powerful. And actually, if I ever come out for a workshop at your business, that's something that's definitely going to be in there. 100%. A really good simple one too for anger. There's a thing called the anger iceberg, which is always good to have on hand for staff, but just get 2 staff members, sit them next to each other. You sort of do it in a safe setting where there's a group of you, and get them just to turn to each other and ask them to, when was the last time you were angry? Ask them to ask each other that question. Then what was the experience of that anger? And then you can kind of come back to the group and actually unpack together what the definition of anger is for you. Because sometimes just talking about how we all react to these different experiences is really powerful, because again, when you're on the door a week later, it's that depersonalization a little bit, you know. We can't ever really take away the fact that when we're under threat and conflict, our body's going to react to protect us from getting killed, essentially, right? Because if we get hit, we could get hurt badly enough that we go to hospital. But sometimes it can help to strip away that sense of, oh, this is personal, this is about me, I'm the problem. But I think role plays are a fabulous idea. And I think, yeah, if you can do a role play in a safe setting too, with someone role playing a pissed off punter, even better, right? Because it's just that exposure and practice. Yep, great.
Thank you. Another question here from Nick. Should we make sure as well that staff use empathy statements rather than sympathy, and make sure they understand the difference?
Yes, empathy versus sympathy. That's a good chat. So, Nick, an empathy statement being, that must be really hard for you, or that sounds really hard, versus, oh, I feel sorry for you, that seems shit. Like, tell me more of Nick's there.
Yes, yep, that sort of thing. So using, acknowledging the punter's feelings rather than saying, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I've been finding it really tricky too," and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think that's, and there's that really cool, you just made me think of that really cool animation, that of the Brene Brown with the bear and the fox or whatever it is, and they do an animation about the empathy versus sympathy statements. Yeah, I think that's powerful, and I think it's a really tricky balance. I think you can always try normalizing with your own experience. So like you just said, Nick, yeah, it's been tricky for us as well to navigate, but it's that fine line of not wanting to disempower what they've gone through, because it's about, I guess in their mind, it's not about you in that moment. But I think that's right. So instead of, I feel sorry for you, that must suck, it's that, yeah, I can hear you. I can hear this is really challenging. And I'm willing to listen. That's a good flag. Absolutely.
I actually have a question. I'm like raising my hand over here. Yeah. You mentioned sort of following up from that is like compassion fatigue.
Hmm.
Could you tell us a little bit more about compassion fatigue?
Yeah, compassion fatigue is a very real issue. Mainly, it was kind of coined in the sector that I'm in, because we sit in a space with others all day and sort of listening to people's different narratives, which is an honor. Um, but if you feel things, because you're human, so if someone's telling you a story about how, I haven't been able to see my loved ones in 4 months for a meal
Mm.
because I don't feel comfortable to get a vaccine certificate, and I just feel like shit. I feel like nothing. I just want to come in and have a beer,
Mm.
and we're all different. Some of us can sort of, I suppose, remove ourselves from that narrative pretty quickly, but others might feel a lot of empathy and might really feel that and really feel for people. And we have compassion. Even if we don't agree with people's beliefs, we can have compassion.
Mm.
And I do see that. I see that, and especially if you've got staff members that are empaths, which relates nicely to what Nick just flagged, but
Mm.
that approach things more with empathy than with judgment or a sense of it's not my problem. So yeah, compassion fatigue really comes back to self-nurturing. So taking the time to look after yourself. I saw something today. I don't know whether it was, I think it was Black Dog that shared this thing today about self-care is not a luxury. It's something that we have to do, especially if you're working in the music sector, I think, and especially if you're working in hospitality.
Mm. Thank you. We've got another question here from Sean. Um, in the case of a customer or staff member being threatened or assaulted, what would be the immediate things you could do to support them besides removing them from the threat and legal responses?
Yeah. Um, yeah, remove them from the threat where you can. I think sit next to them, sit alongside them. Um, so don't assume you have the answers or know what they want in that moment, but just sit next to them, and again, what do you need? That was really, and it's okay to call it for what it is. That was really fucked up. What do you need? How can I help you right now? And knowing the supports that are available beyond you as well, not feeling that you have to hold space for weeks at a time. I think it's important in the moment of crisis to always just plonk yourself next to someone. I think sometimes we run in wanting all the solutions, and I'll do this for you, I'll do this for you. You know, if I'm triggered or I'm activated, I might just want someone to let me yell about it for 5 minutes just to get it out of my system. But other people might want to withdraw. Some people might want to hug. I think just sit down next to them, offer them a cup of tea or whatever you can. And what do you need? What do you need right now for me to support you? But that's such a good question as well.
That's a great answer. And I got a question from Diana. You've raised your hand. Would you like to give your question to Bree directly?
Sure. Thank you. I've got my video off because I got really bad reception here. But yeah, that was absolutely fantastic and so helpful.
Brilliant.
I feel like yeah, thank you. And I just feel like there's so much I feel like the music industry was broken before COVID anyway, because in terms of handling issues of violence, assault, all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot to it's brilliant that Music Vic has got you on board. I guess, what's my question? Actually, one thing I did want to ask was whether when you do, I hope you do more of these, because I'm going to get my other musician friends to jump on here. It's so helpful.
Oh, brilliant.
But,
That's great.
at the start, if it would be helpful if perhaps you could say that this session might be triggering, because I've actually found it really triggering. And, you know, I don't know if anyone else is experiencing that, but it's funny. It's kind of like my hands are really cold and clammy, and I've noticed that I've started going into you know, like flashbacks of all the things that have happened over the years in the music industry. So I guess, yeah, if you could perhaps make that at the start, but also, yeah, that'd be helpful. But also, yeah, I'm just wondering, I don't think I'm going to go back to performing. I think I've finished my time with performing. I've just had enough. But I do want to do what you're doing, which is support other people. So I guess yeah, that's kind of like what next, what now, you know, for the music industry, and how can I, you know, help others.
Yeah, well, all of that was amazing, and just like, you know, thank you for being vulnerable and raw there too. And to answer your question, yep, they're weekly, these sessions. So next week, so every Thursday, so next week will be addressing the awkward, I think it's called. So rebuilding our social skills after lockdown. But with the sort of that triggering experience, that's really, really important, Diana. And I'm wondering what we could do is we'll pop that in at the start, and then maybe what we can do is actually I'll set aside 5 minutes and we can all sort of do a grounding exercise together. People can get as involved or as little as they want in that, because it is important to ground yourself. And I know we just sort of talked about that 4 to 6 seconds of deep breathing. So
that's spot on. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
That's exactly what I was thinking when you were talking about it in the presentation. I was thinking, actually, so many of us don't have those skills. And so even though it's great having it theoretically on the screen, you go, okay, look, theoretically I'll do that next time I get triggered or whatever. but to actually experience it and do it is really helpful, I think. So it's kind of like feedback. Building up. So it's building that, it's skilling up us as well, so that we can then help others do that. But I also just wanted to mention too, for people that might be interested, that Support Act is offering free the mental health first aid training. I don't know if you know about that, but it's so between now and the end of the year, Support Act, and I've registered for that. I tried to do it a few months ago, but I got too triggered.
Yeah, no, good. And good on you for flagging that too. If that's free, that's pretty incredible. Yeah, I recommend everyone to check out their website, because especially if you're in a leadership position, it's a really good certificate. My old company, Sane, actually helped inform the clinical content for that. That's such a great spruik. Thank you, Diana. And I think that feedback's beautiful. What we'll do for the next sessions is we're just going to do a 5-minute grounding at the end of each one, and for sure, let's pop a little trigger warning at the start. Thank you so much for flagging that. And for you too, I was going to say, if you wanted to sort of go into support work, especially if it's tailored to the music industry, there's so many avenues, you know. And I think the peer support model, there's so much evidence coming out that that's really powerful. So potentially running workshops and facilitating really raw conversations about experiences in the music industry, because, you know, where it's it's well overdue. Like, it's time to sort of look after our community, you know, in more ways than one. So thank you for flagging. I appreciate it.
Well, if there's any more questions, please feel free to raise your hand. Give a couple of minutes, but I think I'll take this time to thank Bree for today and for your wealth of knowledge and your services and everything that you're offering. I know you've been really helping me with things transitioning back. You know, it's it's rough getting back into things. You know, a lot of people, I know myself, have done some self work during lockdown, and I'm not the same person I was in 2019. You know, and coming back out into the world of gigs and everything, it's a bit rough. So, you know, I want to thank you for helping me, and and helping everyone else out here. And yeah, we've got these sessions happening all the time. I'll be here with you. We'll be introducing. Thank you very much for your suggestions, Diana, and for all of your questions, everyone. That's it from us today. And I guess we'll see you all in the next session. So thank you very much. And,
Thanks, Kiwa.
yeah, have a great weekend, everyone. Too easy.
Thanks, everyone. Take
See you
care.
guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.